So, welcome everyone to SQL Friday. This is SQL Friday number 45, and our star and guest today is Lou Segers. I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation.
It's perfectly fine pronunciation indeed, Lou Segers.
Good. Lou is going to talk about not trains, but actually about Power BI and how to make your Power BI reports run fast. So that's going to be interesting. Lou, welcome to SQL Friday. The stage is yours. Just take over the screen share when you're ready.
Great. Thanks for the introduction, by the way, Magnus. And I think it's pretty hard to pronounce your last name in a very good way as well. So, so that's not a problem at all. Okay.
It's the one they gave me.
Yeah, I'm in the same situation. They gave me one as well. So, okay, let me quickly share my screen. I'm going to share this one. Yes. Okay. What I'm going to do during this presentation, I'm going to leave it open like this now because I really like to switch between Power BI desktop files and the presentation itself as well. So I'm going to leave it open like it is over here, and we'll be able to switch between them as soon as I have the chance to do so. Okay, so as Magnus already mentioned, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Magnus will take a look at those questions. If you have remaining questions, I'll be happy to tackle them at the end of the presentation as well. Okay, perfect. That being said, so what we be discussing today? Let's turn those slow steam locomotives into streamlined high-speed trains. In the beginning, a lot of people they start developing reports. The only thing that they are actually worried about is about getting the right results. So they have some visuals in mind. They just assemble their data model, and all of a sudden they have their fully working, and it's quite fast, a fully working Power BI file. It only took them, for example, several hours to develop the full Power BI report. But what a lot of people don't really take into account is the report performance and the time it took them to develop the whole report. It can get faster, both the performance as the time to develop the whole report. And this is what this webinar will actually be about. We would like to start off with those slow steam locomotives, so those slow reports, and turn them into very fast ones in terms of development and in terms of performance. Okay, maybe first something about myself. I'm Lou. I've been working, started working in 2016. That's for about 5 years already now. I'm a Microsoft Data Analytics consultant at Belgium's Lytics. It's a consultancy firm located in Boortmeerbeek, about a 30-minute drive from Brussels. I already explained it to Magnus a little bit earlier. I have a strong emphasis on the Microsoft BI stack, so the full stack, also the PaaS components, and for about the last 3 years, I think, I've developed a huge interest in Power BI. I strongly believe in all the capabilities, and it will just remain a very strong reporting set in the upcoming years as well. Good health is true wealth. I do believe that it is very important to exercise a lot in your life. I enjoy going for a sweaty run or a gym session every now and then. During these Corona times, it's a little bit difficult, but difficult is possible as well. So try to exercise as much as possible. Is a good advice, I think. I also have my own personal website for which I write a lot of different blogs. It's called thedatatrain.be. It's also about trains. The whole website is actually symbolized by trains. So make sure to take a look at this website as well, and get connected through Twitter or LinkedIn. Okay. On the agenda for today, 3 different parts. The first part is report best practices. Next, I'll be heading over to how we can resolve a slow dataset refresh. And lastly, we will be talking about evaluating the performance. Of course, we have those slow steam locomotives. We do some adjustments on our data model. And afterwards, of course, we would like to evaluate the performance as well. Okay, reporting best practices. One of the most important things is the rendering time. You really need to reduce the rendering time as much as possible. Only keep those necessary visuals. Every single shape that you include in your Power BI report, it needs rendering time. Is it, for example, a specific bar, a specific line? Every single aspect needs rendering time. So try to reduce the number of visuals that you use in your Power BI report. If you hide them in the beginning, they won't be rendering once you open the report. So hiding is okay as well. I can only strongly advise to use backgrounds. A lot of people tend to cloud and actually add a lot of different shapes to their Power BI report to make it as appealing as possible. But I can only strongly advise to use backgrounds. Create them. You can create them, for example, Power BI or some other tools, and you can simply add them in your Power BI file as well. Let me quickly dive into a sample report. Okay, so heading over to Power BI report, to the Power BI desktop, like you can see over here. So what I've actually did is, this is the AdventureWorks database, one of the mostly used database of Microsoft, I think. I've created like you can see over here, a data model loaded in several tables, the fact internet sales, several dimensions being products, customers, product subcategories, categories, sales territory, and a dim date dimension. So all of these tables have been loaded into an Azure SQL database, and this Power BI file is connected to this Azure SQL database. It's about 60,000 records in here, so it's quite a small data set, but I think it does a perfectly fine job for us to indicate the most important things in terms of performance. Okay, having said that, of course, you can create a lot of different visuals, some appealing visuals. You can see them over here. So quickly created them over here. It only takes a few minutes, but afterwards people tend to create a title, a separate text box. They create separate shapes, etc. And the one thing it's a very easy trick, and you can just add a specific image. I already developed this one in PowerPoint. You can simply edit over here, and the report immediately looks a lot different. And all of these shapes, it's just one shape. It doesn't need any rendering time at all, and it immediately loads. So that's the first quick tip. Also, stick to default visuals. Only use a marketplace as a last resort. One of the main questions I always ask is, about 1 year ago, how were you able to create hierarchy filters? So if we're heading over back to the Power BI file, on the left-hand side over here, you can see that we would like to filter on our specific categories, but of course, for each category, we also have subcategories. So we need a hierarchical structure within our slicer. At the moment, it's also included in the default slicer of Power BI, but of course, about 1 year ago, it wasn't. What people tend to do then, there was some kind of other visual. It's called a hierarchy slicer. I think I have it open in a separate file as well. Yeah, it's this one. People were tend to use this custom visual. It's called the hierarchy slicer because it was able to support those hierarchies. And the default slicer delivered by Power BI, this one, it wasn't able to deliver this hierarchical structure. But what people don't really take into account is that it is quite a big difference in performance. At the moment, it is supported in the default visual, and at the end of the presentation, I'll also show you guys how you can compare the performance of both of these visuals. But there's a quite big difference in performance. Although both of those visuals seem to be working exactly the same. If I use this one, which is the default one, or I convert it to the default, the custom slicer, then it looks pretty much the same. But in performance terms, it's quite a lot of difference. Okay. Yeah. Then next. The next thing I would like to discuss is avoid both directional relationships. That's a very important thing as well. If you are going to use a lot of both directional relationships, you are actually filtering both tables. So you're filtering both tables in both directions. And especially if you have large tables, it can take quite a lot, because when using those both directional relationships, especially when using multiple facts, it can cause a lot of performance issues. There are, however, some alternatives, because in many situations, you, for example, only would like to see the, for example, in our case, the fact internet sales, we have one fact, which is called fact internet sales, and we would only like to see the products for which we actually have some sales. That's a perfectly valid business requirement. It is possible without applying a both directional relationship, for example, by using cross filter within your DAX measures, or you can also add a count rows filter and add it to your filter pane as well. So those are two alternatives which prevent you from using, and which actually yeah, in this case, you can avoid using both directional relationships just by simply going for one of those two alternatives. Okay, then we're at the part of the base measures. What are actually base measures? So in a report, you actually create a lot of different measures every single time. But one thing that I can strongly advise, and really strongly advise, is on all of the columns that actually have a value in them, always try to create one base measure upon them. And why would you like to use those base measures? Well, every single time that you write different measures upon those measures, and in many cases it will be the case that you have several measures being built upon several measures. Every single time that one of those measures will break, then you need to adjust them in the whole flow every single time. So please do create base measures. Every single piece of repetitive piece of DEX code you can simply convert into a base measure, and please do this and refer to the measure, not to please do not repeat the whole calculation every single time. It's also a lot easier to maintain the whole solution, especially if you have a large number of different measures. So just create one base measure, which doesn't involve any business logic at all. It's just a simple sum of a column which has a value, which actually represents a value. Always start with that one. A tool that I really like to use, and I'm pretty convinced that a lot of you guys will already have heard of this tool. It's called Tabular Editor. It's a very useful tool, not only in terms of getting an overview of your data model, but also in terms of development, especially in terms of development. And let me quickly give you guys an introduction on how you can use this tool to speed up your development of your report and to enhance the maintainability of your report as well. Okay, heading over to the same report once again. So what do we have over here? This is the exact same report, the same data model once again. Okay, going to upgrade it as well. Perfect. So the same data model we have over here. What I would like to see over here is so what people actually do is the first thing that they do is I would, for example, like to have I would like to include for each year. I would like to see. Let me quickly edit this over here. Yeah, they would like to see, for example, the sales amount. Let's pick this column. So we have a sales amount for every single year. So 2011, 11, 12, and 13. We have a specific sales amount over here. People, in most of the cases, if people don't know how Power BI actually works, or it's they don't use it very often, they just drag in this specific column. The first thing you should actually do is you should create a specific measure up on top of this column. It's called a base measure, and it will pay off in the longer term, especially in terms of maintenance and repetitive code that you can avoid in this way. So what in most of the cases, I just add the aggregation level in front of the name of the measure, and then add the name of the column. In this case, it will just simply be a sum of the sales amount. Okay, I always, small tip, I always add a little underscore over here, because then it will simply pop up at the top of my table. It's very easy to indicate and to find your measures, especially in larger models. Okay, so a lot of people will be doing this one. They create a base measure. Of course, it will be giving us the exact same result as providing us with the column. But of course, we have now enhanced maintainability. We can refer to this base measure every single time, and we don't need to specify the sum of this sales amount every single time in our measures that we build up on top of this measure. A lot of people also tend to do to add the thousand separator, and in most of the cases they also only would like to see, for example, 2 different decimals. Okay, having done this, now we've just created one single measure. It took us quite a long time. At least I think it's quite a long time to just create one single measure. It's very easy measure as well. We also need to set the formatting of this measure, so it takes quite a while. You can simply open your tabular editor. It's still now open source. You can just simply download it online. It's very easy to find this tool. And what it actually allows you to do is you can set up a connection to any open analysis services instance that is currently open on your desktop. Every single Power BI file has an analysis services instance linked to it. So I can simply open up, I can just choose the report that I would like to connect to. In this case, it's this report, and I can open up a connection. Okay, that's the first thing that I would like to do. Then next, what it actually provides you, it provides you an overview of your full data model, so including tables, different roles, relationships, etc. All of those things are available when you open Tabular Editor, so it's very easy to have a quick overview of your model. You can also it's one of the buttons on the top over here. It provides you with more metadata, and it's very easy to provide you with a lot of different additional information. If you open one of the tables, for example, affect internet sales, it immediately provides you with format strings, the data types, the actual source. Is it a measure? Is it a column? Also, it can give you an overview. You can also hide the columns that are hidden in your report. So it's also very easy to change the layout and as you would like to see it. So it provides you with a very clear overview instantly. Well, what we can actually see is this is the measure that we have created just a few minutes ago. You can see it over here as well with the included format string that you can see over here. Okay, what I would like to do now is I would like to create the same measure, but now starting from Tabular Editor. What I'm going to do is you can so I'm going to head over to the sales amount, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a custom action. I'm going to create a base measure. So if I do this, then what it actually does is it hides the specific column that I just selected. It creates a separate folder called measures, and it adds the sum of the sales amount. So it just simply aggregates it on a sum level, and it creates this kind of measure up on top of this column. So it's very, very useful to have some kind of custom action, and it's very easy to define them yourself within Tabular Editor. How you can actually do this is I have several custom actions that have been set up in the past over here. For example, the one that I just used was create a base measure. It's this one. You can actually it's actually written in C#, so you can adjust the code just like you would like to see it. There are a lot of different snippets of this advanced scripting language that can be found online. I can provide you with the link at the end of the presentation as well. A lot of different snippets that you can use and that you can alter to cope with your situation. Okay, this specific code, this specific piece of code, what it actually does, you can see it over here. It will, for all of the columns that I've just selected, it will create a separate measure. You can adjust the naming of the measures, of course, over here as well. It will place them in a separate display folder. You can also adjust this. It can just you can change the display folder. To your preference, etc. You can hide the base column as well. So all of the things that are that I've just applied have been specified over here. Also, the format string is immediately adjusted. Okay, so what we've just done now is we've created the same measure in. It only took us about 5 or 10 seconds, I think. We can save this, and those changes will immediately be pushed to our model over here. You will be able to see a new display folder over here, the measures one, with a new measure, the one that we just created, or sum of sales amount. Okay, just for future reference, I'm going to delete the old one that we created earlier. I'm going to save it once again, so this one will be disappearing. Perfect, and I've edited over here, so I'm going to change it with our new measure. Okay, perfect. So we've now created this same measure, not in like 1 minute. We did it in like a few seconds, and especially if you do this for a lot of different measures, it can save you a lot of development time. Let me show you guys what you can do as well. Some other samples I have over here, let me quickly introduce them to you, you can create, for example, a year-to-date measure. So based on a selected measure, we're going to create a separate measure up on top of this base measure, which shows us the total year-to-date, which is a very useful and a very common measure that is asked by business people. Okay, I can just simply select our measure, and we can just select a custom action, create a year-to-date measure out of this one, and it will immediately create this one as well. Let me quickly save it, and it will be available over here in our data model as well. This is of course our year-to-date. Of course, it's the same if we add, for example, our calendar, for example, quarters. Then it will be a little bit easier to have this to see the correct calculation of the year-to-date, like you can see it over here. Okay, so the year-to-date works exactly how we would like to see it. Great. You can already assume. Okay, we've now created one time intelligence measure out of this sales amount. You can of course create a lot of them. Let me quickly delete our year-to-date measure. What I'm going to do, I'm going to show you guys a last custom action that I found very, very useful. You can immediately create all of your time intelligence measures in one click. So it's going to provide you with a quarter to date, with a year-over-year change, year-over-year percentage change, a past year measure. All of those time intelligence measures are going to be created in just one simple click. So let me show you guys it all together now. We can simply, going to save it first, we can simply add a custom action, create a base measure. It will be created over here. This is our base measure. And up on top of this base measure, we can immediately create all time intelligence measures. They can be created in like this. This took us how long? I think maybe 10 seconds. They create it all together. And if we save it, of course, then we will have them available in our report as well, and you can all add them over here as well. So it's very, very useful that we have this, that you use tabular editor. It will save up a lot of development time on your end if you create your custom scripts in the beginning. Okay, great. Let me quickly head over to the presentation once again. So this was the concept of creating base measures, how you can use tabular editor to save up a lot of development time. You only need to set up your custom scripts once, and afterwards you can just reuse them throughout the rest of your report. Okay, so that being said, also reference versus duplicate. This is a very interesting part as well. There's a big difference between duplicate and reference. This is actually in our Power Query editor. Once you load in data, please try to take into account what data that you actually import in your model. There's a big difference between duplicate and reference. Duplicate query will actually mean that you do a one-time copy of your mQuery code. A reference actually means that you keep your new query in sync with your reference query. So you only load in the data once, and afterwards you refer from another query to the data that you only load in once. Duplicating a query is actually loading in the same data twice. Okay, next, try to avoid bookmarks. There are a lot of different scenarios in which bookmarks are very, very useful to use, especially if you want to navigate with a specific set of filters from report to report and going through the different pages, then it can be very useful. So there are some very useful scenarios where you can use bookmarks, but if you can avoid them, try to avoid them. It's really a pain. It's really a pain if you need to make some adjustments to these bookmarks, especially if you have a lot of them. I'm quite sure that if you ever have used bookmarks and you had to adjust them and you have a lot of them, that you do know what I'm aiming at. There are some alternatives, of course. You can create separate tabs in the same report. Use dynamic measuring. So, for example, with a switch measure, you can show or hide specific visuals, or you can show a specific measure based on the selection of a specific slicer. So there are a lot of different alternatives, and the switch measure is one of the most well known to avoid bookmarks. Okay, then of course the data modeling part. It's very important that you model your data in a very straightforward way. Yeah, your data model actually should be as transparent as possible. It makes it very easy to build out the rest of your report, and the data model is actually the heart of your Power BI report. It doesn't start with visualization. It starts with getting your data model straight and getting a very robust data model. I believe, I think it was like last week, the guys of SQL BI, Marco Russo and Alberto Ferrari, they wrote a very interesting article on when what's the difference between loading in a flat table and modeling your data based on a star scheme. So it's a very big difference, and please go to take a look at that article, because they do a perfectly fine job at describing the differences between loading in a flat table or actually relying upon a star scheme data model. Star scheme data model, I can only strongly advise to use it as well. So the Kimball's dimensional modeling approach, it's optimized for query performance, and of course you also avoid duplicating your data. So minimize data redundancy. You only keep separate dimensions, and you don't duplicate data within the same table every single time. There are a lot of different data modeling options that you can take into account as well. This out of scope of this presentation. I've added some of them over here as well, so you can take a look at them. But if we would like to have a data modeling session, we can actually spend hours and hours only on talking about data modeling performance tips and tricks. So that's a separate topic. I have added a few of them on the slide over here, and feel free to take a look at them as well. Magnus, are there any questions already in the chat? Let me quickly check in.
There are no questions in the chat, no.
Okay, perfect. If you have any questions, feel free to add them in the chat, of course. If you have any additional questions at the end, I'll be happy to take them at the end as well. Okay, perfect. Mind your date tables. By default, when you create a Power BI report file, then by default the auto datetime functionality will be enabled. It's located in your settings, and what it actually does, it creates for every single column that is of the data type datetime, it will create a specific date table in the backend. So it drastically enlarges your dataset size. For every single date time column, it creates a separate table in the backend. So it's quite a lot of, it's quite a big problem if you have a lot of different date time columns within your dataset. Let me quickly show you guys how it actually works and what the difference is. When you navigate to the options over here, and you navigate to, I think it is data load, the current file. If it opens up our options, yeah, perfect. If you navigate to the current file, one of the options you will be able to see over here is the time intelligence auto datetime functionality. By default, it's if it hasn't been changed in the meantime, but I think it's still the default one. It is enabled, this one, and it does create a separate date table for each datetime column within your data model. Let me quickly show you guys how it actually how you can actually validate this one as well. I just showed you guys an introduction on the use of tabular editor. There is another very useful tool that you can use as well, especially in terms of performance, and it's called Duck Studio. Duck Studio also just can simply connect to a local analysis services instance. It's the exact same process that it works, but it's a very useful tool in terms of optimizing your DAX queries and optimize your data model. So I've opened up a connection once again. We'll be connecting to my local model. You can also connect straight by using the XMLI endpoints. You can immediately connect to the workspaces as well. That's a possibility as well. But in this case, I'll be connecting to a local analysis services instance. And when I connect, what you can actually immediately see is you don't only see those tables that I've added in my data model. You can also see all of those local date tables, and this actually means that I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think it was 8. Yeah, 8 different date time columns, and that is quite a low number of date time columns yet in my data model because it's a very small model. But all of those have been generating a specific date table. Yeah, you could actually ask yourself, yeah, but what's the big deal here? Well, it's actually a big deal in terms of data size, data set size. You can navigate to the advanced tab and view the metrics. And if we click this one, it will yeah, provide you with a lot of different details about the Vertebrate engine. So it will show you guys yeah, how big your data model is. It will provide you with a summary, but also with a very detailed analysis based on a column level even. So you can actually very easy see what kind of columns, what kind of tables take up the most represent actually the biggest size of your data set of your Power BI file. So you can easily take a look at this one as well. So in this case, my fact internet sales takes about 26% of the total data set size of my model at the moment, which is quite a big number, of course, but it's very logical as this is my fact table. What is very useful as well, you can easily split it up in columns as well. Let me do it like this so you guys can see it a little bit more easier. If you take a look at, for example, the dim customer, you can have the overview, the split up. So about 33% of our database has now been consumed by columns that are located in the dim customer table. So that's a huge number in terms of share data set size share. If you split it up per column, you can immediately see the biggest one is the email address, because there are a lot of different distinct values in the Vertex engine. It's a column store database, so you can actually how it actually works is the more distinct values a specific column has, the bigger it gets, and the more difficult it gets for it to provide you with the performance you would like to have. So try to have try to take a look at what columns actually take up the biggest size. And for example, in this case, there are a lot of different cases in which you don't simply need an email address. Try to strip down your whole report and only take into account the columns that you actually would like to report upon. Okay, so in terms of data set size, it's a very clear overview that you have over here. Also in terms of columns, the different relationships that you have within your model. If you have any partitions set up, then you can see this over here as well. The number of rows, I explained it already. It's about 60,000 rows in this one. And especially at the end, you can see the total summary. So for this data set, it's about 11.2 megs big. This is including those local date table ones. So 11.2 megs big. If we're heading over to the date table report once again, we can of course change this option. And also just to show you guys how it actually works, if we're heading over to the fact internet sales, this is actually what I'm talking about. So this is, for example, the due date is a datetime column. It automatically provides you with a with a whole hierarchical view, the whole date table. So this is the one that I'm talking about. But it does this for all of the different datetime columns. If we're heading over to the options and we're disabling this auto datetime option, I'm going to do it in an instant once it loads, of course. Yeah, heading over to the data load, disabling this option. And if we click the OK button, then you will be able to see that it will just simply provide you with the column, and it won't link a specific date table to it. It's only just one simple column now. And if we're heading over to our DAX Studio, you can immediately see all of those separate date tables. They have disappeared now. And if we refresh our metrics, it was 11.2 megs. If we view this one once again, it's only about 8 now. So that's quite a large difference. Of course, this data set is a very small data set, but you can already imagine if you have, for example, 100 different datetime columns, it can get quite big, the difference. Okay. So by disabling this option, by disabling the auto datetime option, you can save up a lot of size within your data set model. So please do this. Please do take into account that you create separate date tables for every single datetime column if you don't do this. Okay, great. Split granularity to a lower cardinality level. I already explained this. Power BI relies upon the Vertex engine, which is it really it stores its data in columnar format. It mainly takes into account the number of distinct values for a specific column. Traditional SQL databases, they mainly take into account the number of rows that you have included in your query. It doesn't work like a traditional SQL database. The Vertepic engine mainly takes into account the different distinct values rather than the row counts. So please do take this into account. Should you split date time values? In many cases, especially if you load in data which is on a date time granularity as well, so it also provides you with a time value, and you will only be reporting upon date level. Yeah, of course, please do split it, and please don't include the time value within your data model, because there will be a lot of different distinct values. Almost every single row will have a separate distinct value, separate distinct date time value. So please do split it then. In most of the cases, I would recommend to split them, because it will just provide you with a smoother performance as well. Okay, so we've just talked about the report best practices. Next part within the presentation will be how to resolve a slow dataset refresh. Let me quickly get into that one as well. Enabling load versus include in report refresh, two different ones. Yeah, many people just leave it by default. By default, it is included in report refresh and it is enabled as load. If you would uncheck the enable load tick box, then your data won't be loaded into memory. This is especially useful for intermediate queries. So if you have some calculations that you would like to perform, but you don't need them within your data model. You don't need to report upon them. You only need them as an intermediate step for your final result. Please uncheck this enable load tick box, because you don't need to load it into your memory of your data model. Unchecking the include in report refresh button will tick box will actually prevent the query from being loaded within your data model. So the include in report refresh should be enabled for all of the tables you would like to report upon. Okay, so we're still talking about trains, of course. Try to spread your dataset refresh schedules as much as possible. This is especially very important for the Power BI premium user over here, especially for the Gen 1. This is a very important tip. Try to spread it out as much as possible, so you don't hit your concurrency limits on your Gen 1 tiers. For the Gen 2, this problem won't be the exact same thing, because there are a lot of different limitations that aren't applicable for Gen 2 anymore. Gen 2 mainly lets Microsoft manages the settings, especially the CPU time is something you still need to look out for. But in terms of concurrency data sets, it's all managed by Microsoft. Okay, try to use shared refresh schedules. You will if you roll out your Power BI environment, especially after a while, you will start seeing that a lot of people are creating the same data set, the same report all over again. They load in the same data. Try to work with the certification labels, validate your data sets, and promote those to all key users, so they will be relying upon the same certified, validated data upon the same data set, actually. Data restrictions. This is a very logical one, but people tend to forget about this one. Filter your large tables. Query folding is a very important one. Query folding shows it will enable you to push your filters that you apply in your mQuery. It will apply them to your underlying data source. So, for example, if you filter after loading in the data from a SQL table, you load it into Power BI, and in your advanced editor you filter on a specific year, it will push through this specific filter to your underlying data source. It will only get the data that you need. So query folding is a very important step into this process as well. This one is out of scope. Reduce the data refresh times. There are 3 different techniques for this one. I will briefly mention them. It's incremental refresh, data modeling techniques that I also mentioned earlier, and manage aggregations, which I'm really a big fan of. Yeah, this is actually out of scope because we will otherwise we will just simply be running out of time. I've included it in the slides over here as well. So the benefits of incremental refresh versus the disadvantages, the same I did for aggregations. Please do take into account that these are very, very, very useful in certain scenarios, especially if you have if you report in most of the cases on summarized data, and in only specific cases you need very detailed information. If you would like to have both of those combinations, so especially when you have an import and a direct connection in comparison, so in combination with the composite models, it can be very, very useful to use aggregations. Okay, and then for the last part of the presentation, evaluating the performance. I already explained some of the third-party tools. We have the SQL Server Management Studio Profiler. Yeah, personally I'm not really a fan of this method because it generates a lot of different metadata. It can be useful, of course, but it provides you with a it provides you with a lot of information, and most of the cases you just need to see very basic information. Tabular Editor and Duck Studio. Tabular Editor I especially use for report development to speed it up and to simply speed it up indeed. And Duck Studio I mainly use for optimizing my DAX queries. And of course, evaluating my my overall dataset size. Okay, the performance analyzer, let me quickly show you guys how this actually works. It's a Power BI built-in feature. Let me quickly head over to the Power BI file once again. You can find it on your View tab in the ribbon. You can select the performance analyzer over here. It's a built-in functionality. And what it actually does is it can provide you with the information that you need in terms of performance. So, for example, what we have here, I'll quickly select the default slicer of Power BI. What we can do is we can start recording and we can refresh all of our visuals. It will refresh all of our visuals, like you can see over here. I'm going to do it twice. Always try to do it twice or maybe 3 different times, just to make sure that you have the same result every single time. And like you can see over here, we have, for example, let me quickly clear this one and do it once again. We have the product filter, which takes about 600 different milliseconds. The product filter is the filter over here. Let me do it once again and once again. Okay, so it's always pretty steady in between 400 and 800 and 900 milliseconds, so always below 1 second to load this specific slicer. It's based on the default one. Like I mentioned earlier, in the past, usually people were using were relying upon the hierarchy slicer, which is a custom visual, and there are a lot of different other custom visuals as well, of course. If we take, for example, this one, I'm going to clear this one once again, going to refresh it. You will be able to see that it takes a very long time to load in comparison with the first slicer we had. It always takes up more than 1 second, so it's quite a big difference, especially in the last one. And these hierarchies are actually not that big yet. Once the data gets bigger, once your data set size gets bigger, it will take a longer time every single time. So please do take into account, if you're using custom visuals, that it may lack a lot of performance. Please do take this into account before using them. If you click this open, by the way, you can also see it split up in the DAX query. How long does it take for the DAX query to be executed? So getting all of the different values. How long does it take for the visual to display? And especially in this one, there's a very big difference in comparison with the default slicer. So it's also being split up, which is very useful to get an indication of is it a DAX query or is it a visual display itself, who takes up a lot of render time. Okay, so having said that one, there's I think this is one of the last parts of the presentation. This has been released pretty recently. I think it was about 1 or maybe 2 months ago now. You can validate your own model against several best practices rules. Yeah, you can. The best way to present it as is you can compare it with the Microsoft Word spell checker. It's exactly the same. It just validates your data model based on a specific set of governance rules, of best practice rules. You can create your own rules, but Microsoft already is a step ahead of you and have assembled a pretty large set of best practices rules already for you. You can very easily use this one as well. You can simply, I'm still connected to the model, by the way, in Tabular Editor. You can simply open your best practice analyzer over here, and these actually are all of the rules that my data model isn't passing. You can also change those BPA rules, like you can see over here. These are all the rules that have been specified. You can select them, deselect them if you don't need some of those rules. But some that I really like are especially the divide functionality, because many people just type it in without the DAX formula. But there are a lot of different ones. For example, hide foreign keys, so people won't be bothered with some technical keys. Are all of the objects are they formatted? Do they have specific descriptions? Are there bidirectional filters? All of the things that are mentioned earlier are also mentioned within these best practices rules. Also the split date time. So make sure to check out this one as well. Microsoft has written a blog about this, how you can implement this by using Tabular Editor. If I'm not mistaken, I've also edited in the presentation. Let me quickly. Yeah, I've edited over here as well. So at February 3rd, they added a blog post about this one. It was Michael Kowalski who added this one. It's pretty easy to use within Tabular Editor. So make sure to check it out as well to validate your model upon. Okay, having said that, please do stay on top of your Power BI game. A lot of different updates are coming out on a monthly basis. Power BI keeps on innovating, especially last year's December update was one of the biggest that I actually saw with we now have composite models for Power BI live data sets, etc. So it's a very big update last December, but there is quite a lot in store for the upcoming months as well. If we can rely upon the future release waves that have been communicated in the past several weeks. So a lot to come, but please do stay on top of your Power BI game by reading the most recent Power BI blogs. Do you need more information? I've also written a blog about this one. You can check it out on our Lytics website, which you can see over here, or on my personal blog, which is thedatatrain.be. Also make sure to check it out over there. Yeah, we've reached our destination. I think this was the most interesting part based on lifting the performance of and of course reducing the development time of your Power BI reports. We've started off with a slow steam locomotive, and of course at the end we've managed to have a high speed train now along the presentation. I hope you all enjoyed the presentation. I hope I learned you guys some tips and tricks. If there are any questions left, you can always contact me. My email is on the slide as well over here. You can always get in touch with me as well, or connect to me via LinkedIn or Twitter. But of course, first of all, are there any other questions that came in the chat, Magnus?
Nothing so far, no.
Nothing? Okay.
I learned a lot today, Lou. Thank you so much. I'm not a Power BI developer, but I do, cheat with it sometimes. So there's a lot to take with me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I really enjoyed giving this presentation, by the way. And if I can tell one more thing, by the way, I really enjoy the concept of the SQL Friday as well.
Thank you.
A lot of different sessions. Yeah, the topics are so various. It's not always about Power BI. It's very, very various. So yeah, congratulations, by the way, on the concept. I really like it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I agree. It's fun. I had fun when trying to do session selection, because we had a few weeks ago we had a presentation about the internal storage of a table and an index.
Which is totally different indeed.
Yeah, and then we had kind of overview sessions of what is inside Azure SQL Managed Instance or in Synapse Analytics, and
yeah.
So I really enjoyed my Friday lunches. I don't get to eat, but I get to really consume good stuff anyway. I do have a meeting, unfortunately, starting right now, so I need to run off. But thank you so much for coming to SQL Friday, Lou.
Yeah,
I hope you will submit again for the next season.
Yeah, of course, no problem at all. It was my pleasure to present on the SQL Friday. Yeah, that being said, yeah, a nice weekend to you already, and thanks for having me, by the way.
Yeah, enjoy your weekend.
Okay, same for you. Goodbye, Magnus. Goodbye, everyone.
See you. Bye.